Hello and welcome. I am so glad that you are here today. We're continuing with our story from the book of Judges. We're looking at Judges chapter 12 today, and we're finishing our story of Jephthah. At the end, we'll have a quick look at 3 other minor judges. So get yourself a cuppa and we'll get started. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I really look forward to seeing and reading some of your comments. A trigger warning for today is that this study will contain references to some violence. Verse 1, the Ephraimite forces were called out. They crossed over Zephron and they said to Jephthah, "Why didn't you go out and fight against the Amorites without calling us to go with you? We are going to burn down your house over your head." So Ephraim criticised and he threatened Jephthah. Ephraim is so offended because he claims he a tribe, not he a person. So Ephraim here is a tribe. Because Ephraim claims that Jephthah did not invite them to the battle against the Amorites. This is not the first time Ephraim has got angry at Manasseh. Ephraim, the tribe, against the tribe of Manasseh for not inviting them to battle. They did it to Gideon, who was also from the tribe of Manasseh. And these 2 tribes are named after the sons of Joseph. They're actually the grandsons of Israel, of Jacob. All the other tribes of Israel are sons, but Manasseh and Ephraim are actually grandsons. There seemed to be a bit of rivalry between these 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, more than there is against the other 10 tribes. At first, I thought the threat to burn their houses down was hyperbole, an extreme overstatement that purposefully and intentionally misrepresents the reality or the real intention. And so when hyperbole is used, both parties tend to understand the sarcasm of the statement. Like one might say, "I'm going to knock your block off one day," or "I'm going to rip your arms off and hit you with the socket ends." But the further I study this interaction, it doesn't seem like hyperbole, but it seems like Ephraim is seriously upset at Manasseh, angry enough to desire to cause the tribe physical harm and damage of their property. Verse 2, Jephthah answered, "I and my people were engaged in a great struggle against the Ammonites, and although I called you, you didn't save me out of their hands. And when I saw that you didn't help, I took my life into my own hands. I crossed over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave me victory over them. Now, why do you come up today and fight me?" Jephthah then called together the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. The Gileadites struck them down because the Ephraimites have said, "You Gileads are renegades from Ephraim and Manasseh." Jephthah engages with Ephraim diplomatically. It seems to be a characteristic of Jephthah's nature because he was also very diplomatic with the Ammonites back in Judges chapter 11. And Jephthah defends himself and he reminds Ephraim that he did in fact call them, but Ephraim didn't save them from their struggle of the Ammonites. Jephthah then puts the ball back in Ephraim's court to explain why they didn't come to help their brothers when they were facing the battle. And Ephraim perceives that the Gileadites, they're renegades, they're deserters or defectors from the tribe of Manasseh, and perhaps that's why they are so aggressive toward Jephthah. Verse 5, the Gileadites captured the fords of Jordan leading to Ephraim, and whenever a survivor of Ephraim said, let me cross over, the men of Gilead said, "Are you an Ephraimite?" And if he replied, "No," they answered, "All right, say Shibboleth." And if he said Shibboleth because he could not pronounce the word correctly, if he said Sibboleth because he could not pronounce the word correctly, they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. 42,000 Ephraimites were killed that time. Jephthah led Israel for 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died and was buried in the town of Gilead. Now, perhaps because Jephthah had just sacrificed his own daughter, he was in no state of mind to think strategically or logically or to act with mercy and compassion. The Gileads secured the river crossing of the Jordan River leading to the Ephraimites' land. And the men of Gilead contrived to test whether or not a man was from Ephraim. And when the men from Ephraim attempted to cross the river, the Gileadites asked them to say one word. And this word occurs only once in the Bible, and it's right here. So Shibboleth literally means ear of corn or river. However, it's not the literal meaning of the word Shibboleth that marks its significance here, but it's the clever use of the Gileadites to distinguish between enemy and ally. The use of the word Shibboleth figures in this story as the Israelites are divided along the Jordan River. Some are located on the west and some are located on the east. The Israelites' tribes, including Jephthah's, had adopted a certain sort of pronunciation and practices of the foreign nations, and they distinguished themselves from their brothers on the western side of the river. The word Shibboleth was such an example. Those in Gilead, they pronounced it Shibboleth, and those in Ephraim, west of the Jordan, they pronounced it as Sibboleth. So essentially, it's just like a dialect was different. So civil war breaks out between Ephraim and the Gileadites, and by the end, 42,000 Ephraimite soldiers die. They're slaughtered at the hands of their brothers. 42,000 men. Let that sink in for a second. The Gileadites and the Ephraimites are both from the nation of Israel. They are both enemies of the Ammonites. The Gileadites, they magnified their dispute with the Ephraimites to take priority over their struggle against their common enemy, the Ammonites. The Gileadites spent their energy slaughtering 42,000 brothers. And at no stage did either the Gileadites or the Ephraimites seek the Lord and his wisdom in this situation. They took their dispute into their own hands instead of going to the Lord. A lack of devotion to God can cause them to misunderstand God's character. And as a result, it's easy to turn to the world for solutions to our problems, just as Jephthah's vow and just as this civil war suggests. God uses Jephthah in spite of his confusion of God's nature and the reliance on solutions offered by the culture instead of God. He still is used by God. It's interesting to observe in Numbers 26. After the second census, the tribe of Ephraim had 32,500 men who were 20 years or older and who could serve in the army. So we're actually comparing apples with apples. We're comparing the same cohort of men. And obviously the population of the Ephraimites increased over time between the census in Numbers and the time of Jephthah. And a quick Google told me this was about 300 years between these two time points. And even if the Ephraimites had doubled in number, this was an absolute massacre of the men in Ephraim. So that what can we learn from this tragic tale? Perhaps that the Christians in the church can both be tempted to turn to the world around us to solve problems instead of looking to our God. And sometimes we can see Christians turn against each other instead of looking to God to restore relationship. We need to be reminded that we are part of one body, serving one God. So that's the end of Jephthah. We've got 3 more judges. Verse 8, after him there was Ibzan. Bethlehem led Israel. Of Bethlehem he led Israel. He had 30 sons, 30 daughters, and he gave his daughters away in marriage to those outside the clan. For his son he brought 30 young women and wives from outside the clan, and Ibzan led Israel for 7 years. Ibzan died and was buried in Bethlehem. After him, Elon the Zebulunite led Israel for 10 years, and Elon died and was buried in Ibzan in the land of Zebulun. And after him, Abdon, son of Hillel from Pirath, led Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons and rode on 70 donkeys. He led Israel for 8 years, and then Abdon, son of Hillel, died and was buried in Penathlon in Ephraim in the hill country of the Amalekites. So having 70 donkeys implied that Abdon was a wealthy man, And today, riding on a donkey doesn't really appear to be flattering, but in those days it was a symbol of status, and usually only great leaders rode on donkeys. And that's all I have today for you from Judges chapter 12. It's been a pleasure spending time with you, and I look forward to seeing you next time when we continue in our study of Judges chapter 13. Bye.